Back when I did my video on weird Yu-Gi-Oh fusions, I found something intriguing about the existence of marine beast and rare fish, where they were near identical counterparts with different colors, but nothing about their lore, effects, or fusion materials references them being related. I want to take a look at more monster counterparts like this that feel like they should be connected, but don't have a fully explained relation either in their lore or non-parallel effects. Or maybe one card is a somewhat baffling recoloring of another existing monster passed off as a completely new one with a different type and everything, or perhaps one or both have an effect that raise some questions. Basically, these counterparts caused me to ask, wait, why, when doing my petty analysis of them, and joining me in this video are my co-hosts from the Fusion video, A.T from Software Agents TV, who provided the Yu-Gi-Oh video game footage.
Alright, another Yu-Gi-Oh video. This means that we can finally go over my Frog the Jam OTK.
And no, we'll talk about that a different time. And my regular co-host, Judgment Meter. How you doing?
I just made cookies, so pretty good.
You're not going with a Yu-Gi-Oh themed character for this video?
I don't know who. Oh, I'm magical in this video. Sparkles!
Now, let's dive into the top 10 weirdest Yu-Gi-Oh monster counterparts. Number 10, Electric Lizard and Thunder Kid. We're starting off with a unique scenario. This is more of an anime reason why they are stranger counterparts. Card-wise, this is fine. One's purple, one's yellow, and they're both electric lizards. The purple one just got screwed over with a more generic name. The yellow one gets a cool name like he's a superhero sidekick. Just imagine him with any electric-themed superhero. Here comes Static and Thunder Kid. Though the purple one gets an effect where he locks down the foe for a turn, so I guess that's a fair trade-off for not getting a cool name. However, the anime portrayed these guys in completely different tones. When Electric Lizard showed up, he was treated as the sinister beast that immobilized Yugi during the first shadow duel against Bakura when the humans were monsters and the monsters were also monsters. Truly a dark time for all. Thunder Kid, though, was Tristan's little buddy in the Capsule Monster spin-off. He was on the level of Happy Lovers in terms of lovableness, so his level of hostility was much lower than his counterparts. He rode on Baby Dragon's back for a combo attack. This is how one can evolve after a few seasons and a spin-off. Get me a plushie of this guy.
It's kind of like a Neopet that will bite your head off and eat it while shocking you with lightning and thunder. Or just lightning, because thunder can't shock you.
But don't you at least want to give him a little hug? The yellow one, not the murderous one.
What's wrong with him?
Absolutely nothing. He's just trying to be a marketable, cute mascot.
He did it wrong.
Nonsense. Rumor has it that Raiden from Mortal Kombat loved this guy so much that he based his sidekick's name on Thunder Kid.
Friendship?
Number 9, Princess of Tsurugi and Queen's Double. This one was so close to being a nice cut-and-dry counterpart duo. Sure, their effects don't work as natural parallels of each other, but one monster is clearly the imposter stand-in for their royal counterpart when she needs to go into hiding or go on a mission of sorts. They found a pretty good lookalike. The denizens of the kingdom will be none the wiser. You just gotta rely on everyone ignoring the different color schemes and it's a perfect match.
Oh my god, they have the same hair thing, the same jewels, and the same face, the same hair.
It would be like when Melina masqueraded as Katana in the Mortal Kombat Deception story and everyone believed her, but no one questioned why Katana only wore pink instead of blue now and why she never takes the veil off ever. But the real weird thing about these almost perfect counterparts is why does Queen's Double actually look like the Princess of Tsurugi rather than the Queen of Tsurugi? You fools! You hired someone who looks like the wrong member of the royal family!
Well, obviously, Mr. Top 10 List, the princess is actually a queen, and the queen's double is doubling for her. It's all about misdirection.
Oh, maybe the princess becomes the queen, and this is like a card of the future.
While I like the way both of you think, it's actually a much more simple explanation. In Japanese, the names make sense. Princess of Tsurugi's Japanese name translates to the Queen of Swords, with sword being the word Tsurugi, so they mistranslated translated the queen part and didn't translate the Tsurugi part. Good job, everyone. That being said, Princess of Tsurugi sounds like the cooler name, but in the end, the princess was a queen the whole time, and these counterparts were only unfitting in the mistranslation. One other interesting note about Queen's Double is that she's part of a counterpart chimera of sorts with the fusion monster Empress Judge. She requires Queen's Double, a counterpart of the princess, to fuse with Hibikami, a counterpart of Sonic Maid, to create Empress Judge, a counterpart of Gyako Tenno Megami. It's a nice display of early Yu-Gi-Oh! Palette swaps in full swing. Also, what is Hibikami holding? Is that a scythe music note? Who else has thought of that? That's really cool.
She just wants to go to bed with that scythe. Fucking love my scythe.
Did the music note scythe break you?
No good.
Number 8, the Archfiend and Obese Marmots of Nefariousness. So one's brown and one's blue. They have varying stats and they're both beast type under the Earth attribute. Pretty simple. But the weird thing about these counterparts is how Konami differentiates these two nearly identical Marmots of Nefariousness. The brown one gets the honor of being described as an Archfiend, the proud demon rulers of Pandemonium. It's a good title. For the blue one, they highlight that he's overweight. They're both the same size. This guy got the short end of the stick when his rulers named him in both English and Japanese. They couldn't have linked him to this cool archetype as well, like saying he's the blue Archfiend Marmot, or the nefarious Marmot of Archfiendness, or if they really didn't want to have too many Archfiend Marmots, they could have just called him the blue Marmot of Nefariousness. In Japanese, the Archfiend Marmot's name is Demon Beaver, so it was always meant to be an Archfiend, with Archfiend being demon in Japanese, while Obese Marmot's name is just Evil Rat. Nothing against rats, but being called a Demon Beaver sounds a lot more dignified, and apparently, in Yu-Gi-Oh! World, the only difference between a beaver and a rat is fur color, so they were never even marmots to begin with.
What the hell is a marmot? What is that?
The marmot is this animal. They're actually in the squirrel family.
Oh, that's adorable. But that looks like a rat, bat, unicorn, squirrel, not a cute badger.
Squirrel. But the point is, Archfiend Marmot got a lot more love, even getting an eventual, more sinister upgrade, putting him even further ahead of the blue guy.
I like that one. Uh-oh, is he eating somebody? Well, you know, he looks cooler there. I like him better.
That's him gnawing on the head of a lesser Archfiend warrior, showing how he's moved up on the Archfiend chain. He certainly upgraded his acorn.
It must be so tiny if that nut is so big.
You know, the underappreciated Marmot also had his own acorn. We can give him some praise too.
I don't like this one as much. He looks scary. I don't like him looking at me. Nuts are not for sitting on.
One day, the obese Marmot of Nefariousness will get the respect he deserves, and then he'll get his revenge on the Archfiends. Number 7, Kaiser Seahorse and Sea Serpent Warrior of Darkness. I always wondered why Kaiser Seahorse was the light monster that acted as a double tribute rather than a monster more generally associated with light, such as Fairy or Spellcaster. It was never a big deal that he was light, but I always felt like he should be hanging out with some water dudes. Then Konami answered my prayers with Sea Serpent Warrior of Darkness, a water attribute sea serpent. Well, I guess that's pretty obvious by the name. Finally getting this seahorse guy in my water deck, I couldn't help but feel something was slightly off about his appearance. I wasn't sure if it was just me or if other people also noticed.
The first guy has less armor, so he looks, I don't know, less powerful.
And that was it. Despite being the stronger monster, Sea Serpent Warrior of Darkness took off his armor. I like that they changed him up from Kaiser Seahorse, but they took away the things that made the seahorse cool.
Yeah, and it's like crazy in the background. He's ready for a fight and, gonna kick some ass. The other guy's just standing there. He's like, maybe I'll poke you with a stick, whatever.
Also, why did they not refer to him as a seahorse? Did they need to differentiate just a few things, specifically the aquatic animal and level of brightness in the room? Okay, team, the other guy was light, so we'll say he's the Warrior of Darkness arbitrarily, since dark is the opposite and kids love the edgy bad boys. Number 6, Shadow Ghoul and Wall Shadow. Now the Wall Shadow card feels like an evolution or retrain of Shadow Ghoul, and to some extent it is. However, what makes me put them in the weird counterpart category is how Wall Shadow was transferred over to the TCG from the anime. In the anime, Wall Shadow was in that double duel with Para and Dox, where duel monsters basically became a different game once Labyrinth Wall turned the field into a fun board game with a maze. Para simply summoned Wall Shadow as a fusion monster with our buddy Shadow Ghoul as one of the materials.
I am merging Shadow Ghoul into the Labyrinth Wall itself by means of polymer. Hey, wait a minute. That's not how you summon Wall Shadow. Poor kids lied to me.
We can't blame the dub here, this was all the source material differing from the official game. When the TCG made Wall Shadow a card, they could have just made him a fusion of Shadow Ghoul and Labyrinth Wall like in the anime, seems pretty simple. You wouldn't even have to change his stats this way, since Wall Shadow hides in the Labyrinth Wall in the anime, the 3000 defense for him was a good way to emulate that the Labyrinth Wall was still on the field despite having to go to the graveyard from polymerization. It would have felt like a Thousand Dragon type of compromise, being a fusion of Baby Dragon and Time Wizard when translated over from the anime to the TCG rather than going with the whole Time Wizard shenanigans, and hey, 100 Dragon eventually combined them both. But instead, to summon Wall Shadow, you have to equip Magical Labyrinth to Labyrinth Wall, which can only be equipped to Labyrinth Wall, and its only effect is that it sends the wall to the graveyard to summon the shadow. I liked it better in the anime when it made the maze even more crazy. It still has the hiding in the wall emulation with this summoning condition, and this is from the same deck that brought us Gate Guardian, so I can't even say it's the most complicated thing that the Paradox Brothers had, but my main question is, where did Shadow Ghoul go? Where is Shadow Ghoul in all of this?
Shadow Ghoul looks like he's doing a little, I was gonna say striptease. He's doing a little shimmy there, he wants to entice you. He's not embarrassed by the way he looks. He's not ashamed by all of his eyes. He's just ready to put forth himself and get back into the dating world by dancing provocatively.
I wasn't referring to his personal life, that's none of our business. I mean that Wall Shadow feels like a completely different entity from Shadow Ghoul, and I think it's a missed opportunity of them not doing more with this card.
Too bad they never made it like an alternate summoning condition. It could have made this deck strategy a little bit more of an actual strategy.
I think they could have given Wall Shadow the effect that Shadow Ghoul has, only maybe increased the bonus of attack points he gets per monster in the graveyard since you had to jump through some extra hoops to summon him, or maybe raise his defense instead since he's more defense oriented. A cooler extra effect for Wall Shadow could mirror how it hid in the wall in the anime, like being able to go into face down defense position after it attacks, similar to how Little Wingguard could change its battle position during the end phase. Another nitpick, it's warrior type. I would have just expected him to be zombie like his counterpart, or maybe fiend to reflect his more demonic power now. All the differences between these two made them feel more like distant cousins rather than an evolution from a simple ghoul to a demon that hides in the walls. I know this was a pretty trivial conversation, but it's been on my mind since like 2002, and it had some relevance to the topic, so thanks for listening. Number 5, Mystical Elf and Dark Elf. These are some of my favorite monsters, not sure why, but the extra bits of personality Mystical Elf showed in the anime and the cool contrasting colors on their respective artwork are likely the factors. On the surface, they make sense. Quite simply, their attack and defense stats are swapped, their attributes are parallel, and the light one has a calming blue skin tone while the dark one is a sinister red.
No, they just have different makeup artists.
Since this was still early in the game's life, only the second TCG set when Dark Elf premiered, they had to give Dark Elf the effect that you have to pay 1000 life points if you want her to attack, because spooky level 4 monster with 2000 attack points in 2002. But what always felt off about this counterpart duo is that there was no fanfare to them. Dark Elf was the first dark counterpart in the TCG and she's just there, no explanation. Dark counterparts became big towards the end of the original anime and during the GX era when the world was crazy about Shadow the Hedgehog. Usually they have some alternate effect compared to their non-evil counterpart like Dark Freed, or there is some bigger story on why the main character is now dark, see Warrior Digreffer. However, Dark Elf hasn't been re-released since Metal Raiders, so she kinda gets buried into obscurity, and there's no backstory of her relation to Mystical Elf. I feel like there's untapped potential here. Mystical Elf got a new version of herself with the pop star Bubbly Elf, so why not retrain Dark Elf to be the misfits to Bubbly Elf's gem? Or at least explain their relation on a random spell card or something? Are they individual beings? Did Mystical Elf perhaps say her chant the wrong way one day and go dark, or did she have another run-in with that Curtain of the Dark Ones, only not turn into Camion Wizard this time?
If you want my personal headcanon, I think they're both sisters. Maybe cousins?
In the video game Falsebound Kingdom, these two could be fused to create Cosmo Queen, so that's really the only time they've interacted. That being said, I like to think Dark Elf is off somewhere creating mischief while Mystical Elf does her endless chant.
Does the other one chant too?
Well, with no anime appearances or card lore, it's up to our imagination, and if I were to guess, I'd say no, she doesn't do it.
Oh, why not? She's just as beautiful.
But who do you favor more, the dark one or the mystical one?
I can't tell you. They're both beautiful in their own way. It would be so mean to make me choose. Don't make me choose!
Well, I'm sorry to say, but it's time for the world's most favorite game show. Make Judgment Meter choose! Now, Judgment Meter, you can only pick one. Who's the prettier and overall better elf?
Why can't I just be a 2-elf meter?
Time's ticking, you only have 5 seconds to pick, or else you have to spend time in the dangerous snake pit.
And this dark elf, both, neither. I can't decide.
Ooh, I'm sorry, Judgment Meter, time's up. The correct answer was actually Ancient Elf, into the snake pit. Number 4, Witch of the Black Forest and Goddess with the Third Eye. This duo's here just because it blew my mind the first time I noticed it. Witch of the Black Forest was a card I always used in the early days, and I'm sure I wasn't alone there, so it became one of my favorites. Despite thinking I knew everything there was to know about this monster, I went over a decade just assuming she was a mild-mannered witch from this alleged forest with no relation to anyone else. However, in the card Mistaken Accusation, we see a front-facing view of the witch, and she looks surprisingly familiar to another monster. That dress, the hair, the ears, and of course the third eye. She's Goddess with the Third Eye, but a different color scheme. Of course, I was always too busy paying attention to Sangan on that card to observe her carefully, but the evidence was right there for us the whole time. I always thought those brown things were just a part of the witch's hair, but all she had to do was rotate 90 degrees and we would learn that she has fuzzy ears like her sister or cousin. I'm not sure about their relationship, but there's some potential lore here. I wasn't even suspicious that they had the same eyes on their dresses. I just thought the witch had it there for the dark arts and the goddess, I don't know, she's eye-themed. Even though I'm saying that this counterpart duo is quote-unquote weird, I think that everything about them was well executed to cover up how they are essentially palette swaps of each other. The lighting and angles of the monsters on each card really accentuate different parts of their faces, and the very different effects don't make you suspicious that they're related. You could even argue that Sangan's parallel effect to Witch makes him a better counterpart for her. He even has the forehead eye to fit in. That being said, Goddess could easily overrule Sangan by replacing him in the Sandwich fusion due to her effect, so there's at least some opportunity for some family bonding with this duo. They can also create Musician King together. A witch and a goddess create a rock star, who would have guessed? Number 3, Basic Insect and Invader from Another Dimension. It's one thing to make this alleged invader a different version of one of the crazy creatures from Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially when it's from the first TCG set when everything was experimental. However, of all the unexplainable monsters to base him on, why did you choose Basic Insect, a monster that prides itself on being a standard unspecified insect?
It's a bug.
Astute observation. Now what do you think about the incredibly different invader?
A bug with pointy things. Well, here it kind of looks like nipples. Can I say nipples on YouTube?
Yes, you can say nipples.
They look like nipples.
But they're palette swaps. The Basic Insect has those spikes too.
So it does. I like this one because it looks like it's wearing a coat. You know when those spiky things could be buttons.
To be fair, in the few anime appearances this so-called Basic Insect had, it was anything but basic. Weevil liked to equip laser cannons to it, which was hardcore and kinda turned it into a Digimon.
In his eyes or on his back.
They were full-on backpack weapons, though now that you mention it, I could imagine the invader shooting eye lasers like he's some sort of sci-fi alien from a 1950s movie. Speaking of invaders, he kinda looks like Zim. Maybe I didn't give this design enough credit. Or perhaps its powers are to imitate Earth life forms and it's disguised as a bug. The more I talk, the more this makes sense. Or maybe it's the other way around and this invader is actually just a basic insect who thinks he's more important than he really is.
Yeah, he's a bug. The other one's a blue bug. He's a little prettier.
Number 2, Two-Mouth Dark Ruler and Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. I don't blame the Dark Ruler for this one. He was living his life until a certain dragon tried to snatch his look. What made the Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon weird was how Konami clearly targeted this recolor as the specific Thunder Dragon fusion. For other early fusion monsters that looked nothing like their source material, it was mainly because Konami just just took normal monsters from the manga or anime and decided to arbitrarily make them fusion monsters with material that generally just matched the type or attribute. But here, they were dead set on making a Thunder Dragon fusion and just recolored a random monster. If they wanted to recolor, aren't there other two-headed monsters out there? What about two-headed King Rex? He could look good in pink.
This one irritates me because I've always thought the Thunder Dragons were really cool cards from the get-go. I've always thought they deserved better, and thankfully they got better because now they have their own archetype. I mean, in the anime, twin-headed Thunder Dragon is a twin-headed Thunder Dragon. But here we get a big red shoe with two mouths. And yet, it still doesn't deter me from playing the card.
I like how the anime basically rejected how it looked on the card and made their own. If they were hell-bent on making a Thunder Dragon fusion, couldn't they just wait for a later set to design one? The wool was pulled over no one's eyes with this. He doesn't even look that dragony. I'm fine with the unicorn horn and goofy mouth, but the chicken legs were a possible design flaw. For most of these entries, each monster duo wasn't the most well-known. You had some classics in there, but none were part of a large archetype or known outside of the game or anime. However, this duo takes an incredibly famous monster that eventually spawned a major archetype and tries to play it off like we wouldn't notice a recoloring that claims to be a different monster. Number 1, Karibo and Wretched Ghost of the Attic.
Oh, it's Karibo!
No, it's a spooky ghost that's nothing like our fuzzy friend.
No, it's Karibo! He's the same.
Fine, I can't argue.
Why are his eyes glowing?
To quote the most cliche internet review question, what were they thinking with this one? Karibo was one of the most notable monsters in universe, either being that Magikarp style punchline when looking for a monster with a weak stat line, or because it had a good effect with a marketable plushie mascot design. The point is, even if Konami did not expect Karibo to become such a big archetype, they could have seen that the original monster was meant to be a well-known entity looking at the manga that the card game was based on. It would be like if they made a dark magician that wore yellow instead of purple and just called him Crazy Staff Man with no connecting lore. It's one thing to recolor Thunder Kid, but when you recolor some famous monsters, you're gonna raise some eyebrows. Making a completely unrelated palette swap Karibo just makes it seem even more out of place, specifically because the name and lore play completely straight that he's a new monster.
What I don't understand is, why didn't they just call this card Attic Karibo in the first place? I mean, that way it could have been part of an archetype.
At the very least, they could have eventually renamed him once the Karibo archetype became more popular to make him like a normal counterpart. It would have been a nice little nod to the audience, like how Ancient Jar is just the morphing jar without powers. Based on their original Japanese release dates, Wretched Ghost was released less than a year before Karibo was, so there wasn't much of a gap. If there was a larger period of time between these release dates, I might have cut Konami a little more slack. A larger gap might have meant Ghost was just a placeholder while they were working on a real Karibo card, or perhaps Karibo was a retrain. However, I don't think either was the case. I think this was just an oversight. That being said, something about this whole situation amuses me. While some of the unrelated counterpart duos have some generic lore that differentiates them, I feel like the extra touches make the Ghost kinda lovable. He arbitrarily lives in attics, and he's not just a ghost, he's a wretched ghost. He's unhappy, and he's not just one person's problem, he's in any ol' attic.
So he might be in my attic?
Your attic indeed falls in the any ol' attic category.
So that's what the scratching is at night.
The Japanese name just translates to Ghost of the Attic, so when brought to English, they thought this ghost needed a little more spice to the name. Wretched is a fun word to say. So despite being an inferior Karibo, Wretched Ghost of the Attic has the name and quote-unquote backstory among other aspects to get him and Karibo as the top spot for the weirdest Yu-Gi-Oh! Counterpart monsters. Now, what did you think? Were you a fan of any of the duos we discussed? Were they not as weird as we made them out to be? Are there a set of counterparts that make you raise your eyebrows more than these guys? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.